So the four-way straight leg circuit used to be a staple in rehab. It was used to rehab any lower extremity injury. If you had an ankle or hip or knee injury, if you go back to the 90s, you're just going to see people doing four-way leg lifts. And since then, it's kind of fallen out of vogue, and you don't see it around as much. For me in my career, it was one of those things, you come out of school, you're like, the four-way leg circuit is great. And then you're like, I should look at the hip and maybe the ankle. You're like, oh no, I need to really also strengthen the hamstring and quads. Then you're like, let me look at the core and how the whole thing moves. Let me integrate it all. And then you keep going, you're like, oh, it's all about cortical mapping and homuncular smudging. Then you get into pain science and you're like, oh, it's all about perception and how your nervous system is driven. And then you go into dynamic systems theory and, how everything matters and how all that integrates with each individual. And then eventually you get back at the top, you're like, the four-way straight leg circuit's a good exercise. While I don't often prescribe it for my clients, I do think it has its place in rehab. There's 4 things that I think it does that can be beneficial. Number 1, it unloads the joints. So if somebody's got a really achy and acute injury and any load through that joint just makes it worse, sometimes unloading the joint will make a big difference. Exercise in unloaded positions. So people that don't tolerate squats and lunges and step ups and single leg balance, sometimes they need to be regressed to stuff like this. The second thing it does is it allows you to isolate muscles and strengthen weak muscles. So sometimes people do test weak, and if it's an exercise that doesn't bother them and you're strengthening a weakness, I think that's a win-win. The third thing it does is I think it can help people's body awareness and proprioception or cortical mapping, whatever you want to call it. Essentially, if somebody can't feel where their leg is in space when they're doing dynamic exercises that are moving, squats, lunges, or even sports, when you slow it down, they can really feel where everything is and learn to control it better in that type of environment. And then the fourth thing I think it does is it allows people to relatively rest. So I think a lot of times people can get these cumulative injuries because they don't really rest. They're just kind of inflaming things and not resting. It's just kind of slowly building and not getting a break. I remember I worked with one practitioner early in my career, and I remember she had this interest in philosophy. I thought she was joking at first when she told me, but the more I've thought about it, the more I think she was onto something. We were talking about a patient that had tried rehab and didn't do well, and then got surgery and was better. And she was like, the surgery worked, but I also wonder if it just forced him to rest. This was somebody that didn't stop doing, they were working 80 hours a week and then working out 2 hours a day. Their home life was stressful. So when they had surgery, they actually had to slow down and do nothing for at least 2 weeks and then slowly build up from that. So if you've seen the research on meniscus tears and meniscectomies, they even did a study on placebo surgery versus real surgery, and they found there was no effect. So that might be one of the reasons why, is because it slows people down and allows them to recover. And that's what I think this four-way leg circuit will do for people. It'll help them build strength and exercise while also recovering. So I'm going to show you the four-way leg circuit and also some cues that I use to patients just to maximize them. But they're pretty safe exercises. Even if they're done mindlessly, it's usually not going to do harm. But if you're having pain and it's not working when you're doing, the social media exercises or the fancy ones that are highly loaded or dynamic, sometimes just regressing to the easiest movement can sometimes be helpful. During COVID, everybody went to that Bob and Brad YouTube page, and I think that's one of the reasons why that blew up, is because they were just doing simple and effective exercises that worked, like traditional physical therapy. Like, it works. Sometimes, that fancy YouTube and Instagram stuff is really cool and effective for some people, but other people it's gonna be way too much and just make them worse. So if you're having leg pain and it's not getting better, you could try these. So for all 4 of these, it should really be a core exercise. Your pelvis and your rib cage should be able to stabilize and not move while you move your leg. All the movements coming from the hip and the knee and the ankle are locked and stabilized. So the first one is the forward straight leg raise, the flexion. So what you do is you squeeze your quad maximally, pull your foot up, tighten your core, and then just lift up to about halfway and down. The mistake a lot of people make is they just kind of flex their leg up and down, kind of mindlessly. And that's not bad, but that's going to mostly strengthen the rectus femoris. That's not going to strengthen the rest of the quads. So you really want to focus on squeezing the quad as much as you can the whole time. Pull that foot up, tighten the core, lift up, down. Some people need to relax after each rep and reset. If you've had a knee injury, that repetitive quad set where you're relaxing your knee, then squeezing again can be beneficial. Or if you don't have the time or the mental energy to reset each time, you could just lock it out, tighten your core, and go up and down for 10 to 20 reps till you fatigue. The next one is going to be the sideline hip abduction. So I'll do this leg here. So this might be one of the tougher ones to do. So the number one thing you want to do is keep your ankle, knee, hip, and shoulder in line. A lot of people will tend to flex their leg forward, and that's going to work the TFL. So it's always further back than you want to go. As you're going back, the second mistake most people make is that they'll arch their back to compensate, and then they're just kind of cranking on their back. So again, tighten the rib cage and the pelvis and the core, keep a little bit of tension. You know, you don't need to maximally brace, you're just kind of keeping tension. You can put your hand here and then you just go up and down. You're not going to be going as high on this one. The third thing to look for is that you're not just hip hiking at the pelvis. So I could do this, which would be like a quadratus lumborum exercise. But really what would be beneficial is, again, quad set, squeeze the leg, and just that femur moves. And I can feel this muscle, this glute med muscle, working pretty hard. That one will usually fatigue quicker. The third one is extension. So you lie all the way down, you can relax your head, and then you tighten your core a little bit and just squeeze and lift up. The mistake most people will make here is they'll bypass their hip and dump into their back. It's better, I think, just to tighten your core and focus on those small movements. You can squeeze your glute muscle if that helps. People that can't tolerate that position, I'll have them go on to quadruped and do it this way. And then the last one is adduction. So you lie on your side. Same thing, you squeeze the quad, bend the leg up, and you just lift that leg towards the ceiling. So same thing where you don't want to hike your hip, you don't want to arch your back. That leg is just moving in one plane. So that's how to do the 4-way straight leg circuit. If you haven't had surgery, you can just use that circuit, do 2 or 3 sets, and just go close to fatigue or failure. You can do 10 to 20 reps. They're very safe. Just if you're sore and in pain the next day, regress it down. If you did 3 sets of 20 and your legs are screaming at you the next day and not in a good way, then maybe do 3 sets of 10 the next day. If you've had surgery, check with your surgeon or your physical therapist, especially for knees, especially after knee surgery. What most people miss with this is that they don't get that lock in the knee, and then they start to lift it and they have what we call a lag, where there's a little bit of uncontrolled accessory motion in the knee joint, which can just irritate joints. So if you've had knee surgery or if you're having knee pain, you want to make sure that when you do that quad set, when you squeeze your quad, it locks and the whole thing's moving together. Because if you don't have that, that circuit will likely flare you up and not be beneficial. So if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments and I'll answer as quick as possible. But I think that circuit can help some people.